March 20th, 1972. Mount Fuji, Japan. The mountain was nearly 10 degrees warmer than normal that morning, and that warmth is what killed them. By the end of the weekend, 24 climbers had not come back down. One of the groups up there was the Shimizu Workers Alpine Club. Japan's climbing federation had a nickname for how readily they turned back. They called them the Runaways. They turned back that Monday. It didn't save them. Not one mistake. A chain. Welcome to tourist tragedies. Mount Fuji is 3,776 meters high, and for most of the year, it is the friendliest big mountain in Japan. In summer, it is one of the most climbed mountains on Earth. There are huts, there are vending machines, there is a post office at the summit. School children do it, grandparents do it. It is printed on the currency. But Fuji is not a mountain range. It is a single freestanding cone sitting by itself near the Pacific coast. And that one piece of geography is the reason this story exists. In the Alps, a storm has to fight its way over 100 kilometers of ridges before it reaches you, and every ridge takes something out of it. Fuji has nothing upwind, no shoulder, no neighboring summit, no valley to bleed off the pressure. Weather that arrives at the coast arrives at the mountain almost intact, and then the shape of the cone accelerates it. In March, that turns Fuji into a completely different mountain, wearing the same silhouette. The huts are shuttered. The snow is deep. Above the 5th station, the ground goes smooth and hard, frozen volcanic ash under old snow, with nothing to catch you if you start moving. Which is exactly why the clubs came. It was the best snow training ground within a train ride of Tokyo, Nagoya, and Osaka, and teams bound for the Himalaya used it as a proving ground. On the weekend of March 18th, 1972, there were 7 organized groups and 4 solo climbers on that mountain. 55 people. Not tourists, not day trippers, not one of them up there by accident. Every single one of them had chosen the hardest season on purpose. The part that gets me about this story is that none of them were wrong to be there. March on Fuji was normal, so the question is not what these people did wrong. The question is what had already been loaded into that weekend before any of them stepped onto the snow. Start with who they were. Post-war Japan had a climbing boom, and one of the strangest and best things to come out of it was the Workers' Alpine Club. These were not university expeditions or wealthy alpinists. They were ordinary working adults, organized through a national federation, who climbed on the only days they had, weekends, public holidays. That was the whole calendar. And that calendar is the first thing that got cut. Not the gear, not the route, not the ambition, the time. When your training window is a 3-day weekend, the weekend is not the plan. It is the wall the plan has to fit inside. The second thing is what they were wearing. Japanese winter mountaineering clothing in 1972 was built around one problem, and that problem was cold. Insulation, wool, down, windproof outer layers. Waterproofing was not a priority because on a winter mountain, water is frozen. Rain belonged to summer and to a completely different set of equipment. When wind drives hard enough, water finds the seams of clothing that was never designed to keep it out. Every group on Fuji that weekend had prepared thoroughly for cold and barely at all for rain. The third thing is how they knew what was coming. There was no forecast app and no mountain bulletin. Serious climbers listened to the radio weather broadcast and drew the pressure chart themselves by hand from a spoken list of readings. The Shizuoka Chozan Alpine Club drew theirs before setting out on Saturday the 18th and judged conditions acceptable. They were right about what the chart showed. They were wrong about what it meant. And none of this was new. 18 years earlier, in 1954, 15 people died on this same mountain in a mass accident. And in that one, an avalanche released around the 7th station and ran all the way down to the low slopes. That is the warning sitting in the record. On Fuji, a slide that starts high does not stop where you would expect it to. Nobody in 1972 had any reason to think that weekend would be different. And for 2 days, it wasn't. Saturday, March 18th. 3-day weekend. Monday was the spring equinox holiday, which meant a rare and precious thing for a working adult in 1972. 2 clear nights on a real mountain. The Shizuoka Chozan Alpine Club came up with 9 people. This was a local club on a local mountain, the kind of familiarity where you know which turn in the trail the wind hits you on. They were not there for the summit. They were there to train because members of that club were preparing for a Himalayan expedition, and Fuji in March was where you found out whether you could actually live on snow. Among those 9 were 2 men who would spend the following morning walking down through a storm that killed the other 7, and who would reach the bottom alive. The Shimizu Workers Alpine Club came with 18, and they did the sensible thing, which was to split by ability. 7 of them, the ones with the deepest winter experience, went high for the summit. The other 11 set up camp near the 5th station to train on ground they could handle. One of those 11 would end up being the only person from his entire descent party to reach a police station. And somewhere on that mountain, entirely alone, was a man from the city of Mishima. He had come up by himself. He did not know he was about to become part of somebody else's story. Around them, filling in the rest of the mountain, 4 men from the Nissan Shitai Company Club. 3 friends from Toyokawa, new to winter climbing, camped low. A club from Tokyo, a club from Kyoto called the Gakuyukai, a climber up from Osaka on his own, a climber from Yokohama on his own. 55 people spread across one cone of volcanic rock, most of whom would never meet each other. In August, that mountain carries thousands a day. In March, on the Gotemba route, you can go hours without seeing a single person who is not already in your tent. Sunday morning, March 19th, was clear, properly clear, the kind of blue that makes the whole cost of the trip feel cheap. The Chozan 9 climbed and pitched their tents 200 meters below the Hoei crater, the enormous scar on Fuji's flanks, left by an eruption in the 1700s. The Shimizu 11 trained on the snow near the 5th station and turned in early. Higher up, the Shimizu 7 settled into a hut at the 8th station. The Kyoto Club took a hut. The 3 from Toyokawa pitched a tent low on the mountain and got comfortable. Boots off, stoves on, wet gloves hung up to dry. Everything on Sunday afternoon was completely and unremarkably fine. It stopped being fine before a single one of them was asleep. The Chozan Club finished its snow training, and almost immediately the weather changed. Not gradually. Fog came in and settled. The wind picked up and kept picking up. And by the time the last of them was in a sleeping bag, it wasn't snowing anymore. It was sleeting. That distinction is the entire disaster, and nobody in those tents could possibly have known it yet. Sleet is water. Water goes through fabric that snow simply sits on top of. Through the night of the 19th, water worked its way into the tents and then into the sleeping bags. And there is no version of this where you get it back out again. There is no dry layer in reserve. There is no hut to run to. You are lying in a wet bag on a volcano at 2,500 meters in the dark, and the temperature is climbing. Down at sea level, off the west coast of Japan, a low-pressure system began deepening at around 3 o'clock in the morning, and it deepened at a rate meteorologists compare to a typhoon. It tracked northeast, up the Sea of Japan. Air came rushing in behind it from the south. Warm air, moving fast. In Japan, this has a name, Haru Ichiban, the first storm of spring. Now, hold 2 facts next to each other. On Fuji, cold rain had been falling sideways since the middle of the night, and it did not stop when the sun came up, and Monday the 20th was the last day of the holiday. Almost everyone on that mountain had work on Tuesday morning, trains to catch, shifts to make, machines to be standing in front of. The 3-day weekend that made the trip possible in the first place had one hard edge on it, and by Monday morning, they were sitting against that edge in wet clothing. The Chozan Club was 2 hours from the trailhead in good conditions. 2 hours. 9 experienced climbers, a route they knew, a downhill walk, on a mountain they had trained on for years. At 3 o'clock on Monday morning, all 9 of them were awake in the dark, arguing about what to do. To understand what happens next, you need to understand what a Haru Ichiban actually is, because on paper, it looks like good news. Here is the setup at 3 o'clock that afternoon, reconstructed decades later from Japan's long-term reanalysis weather data. a low-pressure system at 992 hectopascals sitting to the north. To the west, over the continent, a Siberian high at 1024. To the south, over the East China Sea, a Pacific high at 1020. Squeezed between those, the pressure lines on the chart are packed almost on top of each other. That is the only thing you ever really need to read on a weather map. Lines close together means air sliding down a steep hill, and air sliding down a steep hill is wind. At the fifth station, wind through the afternoon ran at 31 to 35 meters per second, with gusts reported up to 50. Call it 112 to 126 kilometers an hour, gusting near 180. For context, if this were a typhoon, 25 meters per second is the threshold where forecasters start drawing the storm zone onto the map. And now, the part that kills people. That warm southerly air pushed the temperature up. At the fifth station, it had been 0 degrees at 9 o'clock on Sunday night. By 3 on Monday afternoon, it was 5 degrees above freezing. Above freezing means rain. Not snow you can knock off your shoulders. Rain. Wind chill works out at roughly 1 degree, lost for every meter per second of wind. 30 meters per second takes about 30 degrees off you. Being soaked through takes off roughly another 10. Start at 5 degrees, subtract all of that, and you land somewhere between minus 30 and minus 40. A home freezer runs at about minus 18. They were in soaking wet clothes at roughly double that, standing up in wind on an open slope. At that point, a human being is not cold. A human being is a heat source being actively drained, and the clock is very short. And 9 of them were about to start walking. Quick heads up, every week I drop new videos you won't find anywhere else. Please subscribe. 3 in the morning. All 9 Chozan climbers awake. They talk it through in the dark. Continue the training or go down. They decide to go down. It is the right call. 7:30. They start walking. Nobody has eaten. They are cold, they haven't slept, and food feels impossible. 20 minutes in, a man goes down, then another, then another. There is no drama to it. Hypothermia takes coordination first, then judgment, then the ability to stand. 2 of them reach the bottom, 7 do not. A walk that takes 2 hours in good weather takes them close to 10. Further up, the Shimizu 11 are losing their camp. The blizzard buries the tents faster than they can dig them out. They abandon them and get into a mountain hut. The hut fills with blown snow. The fuel runs low. Then the wind eases, just slightly. Just for a while, they take it. 11 of them, plus the solo climber from Mishima, 12 people, start down. 90 minutes in, 1 man collapses. They get him into a sleeping bag and keep moving. Near the 4th station, 6 more go down, one after another, straight into unconsciousness. 5 left. 2 of them are swallowed by the fog and never seen again. 3 keep going, just 3, somewhere around the 2.5 station, low on the mountain now, close enough to the bottom to believe it. They stop to rest. And then the snow itself let go. Warm rain had turned the snowpack to slush. It came down on them twice. 1 man dug himself out. He walked into Gotemba police station and asked for help. And that was the moment anybody at the bottom of that mountain learned that anything at all had gone wrong. The response was immediate and enormous. Shizuoka Prefectural Police, the Shizuoka Alpine Club, the 2 stricken clubs themselves, the Gotemba Fire Service, and the city office put 150 rescuers together. The Ground Self-Defense Force sent 100 more from its Fuji school, ranger units among them, 250 people searching for 24. They found some. 2 of the 4 from the Nissan Shitai party came out alive. The 3 from Toyokawa were found in their tent, unhurt. They had been too inexperienced to attempt a descent, so they had stayed exactly where they were, and they had no idea a disaster had happened, or that anyone was looking for them. The climber from Osaka was recovered dead. The final count was 18 bodies recovered and 6 people never found at all. Those 6 are recorded in Japan's National Avalanche Disaster Database as avalanche fatalities, buried somewhere on the lower slopes. 24 dead out of 55. And the 7 Shimizu men who had gone high, the most experienced members of that entire club, walked down from the 2.5 station completely unharmed. They had sat out the storm in a hut at the 8th station. It remains the worst mountaineering disaster in Japanese history involving ordinary civilian climbers. Japanese mountaineering literature files it under a specific term, Kisho Sonan, a weather accident, not a fall, not a technical failure, exposure following a decision, and the decision is where this gets uncomfortable. Because when you lay the facts in sequence, a terrifying picture begins to form. 1. The equipment era. Every group carried gear engineered against cold and almost nothing engineered against water, because in a Japanese winter, the water is supposed to be frozen. That is not negligence. That was the state of the art, and it worked fine right up until the temperature went the wrong way. 2. The weather judgment. A chart drawn by hand from a radio broadcast on Saturday, read by people who genuinely knew this mountain. The Japanese analysis of the accident makes a point that is hard to shake. Local experience worked against the Chosan Club. They knew the descent took 2 hours. That knowledge is what made pushing through look survivable. 3. The lull. Both descents began in a break in the weather. Japanese climbers have a name for this, and it is the single most useful thing in this whole story. Giji Koten. Pseudo-fair weather. The false clearing inside a storm system, the one that reads as the end of the bad part and is very often the middle of it. The Shimizu Club had sheltered successfully. They came out of shelter because the sky told them the fight was over. 4. Tuesday morning. These were working adults on the last day of a public holiday, and the Japanese record is direct about it. The group facing work the next day forced the descent. The pressure that walked them into that storm was a shift roster. And here is the control group, sitting right there in the same data set. Every group that stayed put lived. The Kyoto Club, the Tokyo Club, the Shimizu 7 at the 8th station, the 3 beginners from Toyokawa who did not know enough to try. The mountain sorted 55 people by exactly one variable, and it was not skill and it was not fitness. It was whether they waited. Which brings us back to Kyoto. That club came down to the 2.8 station early on Monday morning, moving fast. And then they stopped. They pitched a tent and stayed in it while the storm went over the top of them. The reason they gave is on the record, and it is about 10 words long, and it saved every one of them. It's fine to take one day off work. 24 people died because a mountain got warmer, the rain got in, the sky opened for 20 minutes, and Tuesday was a working day. So, here's what I want to know from you. Would you have waited? Tell me in the comments.